Three things for you today. Three things, okay? Say it with me, those three words that start with L. Look, listen, love. Today we're talking about Jesus' transfiguration. We read about just a few minutes ago, and it's when Jesus' appearance changed radically. He took three of his disciples, Peter, James, and John. And boy, these guys were a little rough and tumble. I don't know about you, but I grew up thinking the disciples were really just kind of nice guys, really mild. These are fishermen, maybe a little more like longshoremen. And they are essentially Jesus' best friends, Peter, James, and John. Remember, Jesus is true God and true man. So he's going to have a couple of buds that are close to him, just like any human being would. And he chooses Peter, James, and John to go up this mountain with him. Now, just before this, Peter had said something wonderful. Jesus asked him, "Who do people say that I am?" And Peter said, "You're the Son of the living God." It's like, correct, ding, 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 ding. And then Jesus said, "Let me tell you what's coming next. I'm going to go to Jerusalem. I'm going to be mistreated by the religious leaders. I'm going to suffer and to die. And then I'll be raised on the third day. I'll be raised back to life." And at that time, Peter said, "Wait a minute, Jesus." In fact, it says in Matthew's gospel that Peter pulled Jesus aside. Kind of like Peter's going to tell Jesus that he's wrong, but he's not going to embarrass Jesus in front of everybody. You got me on that? Jesus, come here. That's never going to happen to you. And Jesus said, "Get behind me, Satan. You don't have in mind the things of God, but the things of men." And then it's just 6 days after that, Jesus takes Peter, James, and John to go up this high mountain. Now, as we're looking at this, I want you simply to picture what it would be like to be with Jesus. When I read this, for many years I just read this, and it sounded like, okay, Jesus took Peter, James, and John, and they're at the top of the mountain, or wherever they stopped on the way up. Now, have any of you ever climbed a mountain? Have any of you ever gotten to the top of that mountain or that hill, whether it be Grandfather Mountain in North Carolina or some mountain in the Rockies, and you get there just like that? Oh no, it takes hours. So Jesus has this time with Peter, James, and John. We don't know what the conversation's like. We don't know what Peter, James, and John are thinking, whether they're maybe they argued many times about who was the greatest. Maybe they're talking about how Jesus chose us. We're the greatest, but they're going up this mountain. And what they're going to see there is going to be amazing. There on the mountain with Peter, James, and John, Jesus was transfigured before them. What does this mean? His face shone like the sun, and his clothes were as white as the light. Now, I don't know about you, but there are times at this time of year, I don't know why it ends up being this time of year, that either I'm driving west in the late afternoon, and there's the sunlight, right there, and my visor does not block that out. If I could have a visor that would block that out, that would also mean I couldn't see where I'm going. Some people say that they watch me drive, and they don't know that I know where I'm going anyhow. And so you end up driving because the light is blinding. You're just like this, try doing that at 45 miles an hour on the 408, right? Or is that's all I go on the 408. No, I don't try and go 408 miles an hour on that. So Jesus, as Peter, James, and John are seeing Jesus, this is way more than just, let me block out the light. They can't see anything except Jesus and his brightness. But then they catch a glimpse that Jesus is there talking with two people from the Old Testament, Moses and Elijah. I could talk for many, many minutes about why Moses and Elijah kind of fit this picture. Moses, it says that God buried Moses. And Elijah, he went up to God in a whirlwind in the chariots with cherubim angels. Maybe that's part of it. But Luke's gospel says that Jesus is talking with Moses and Elijah about his upcoming exodus, his trip, his going to Jerusalem. The same thing that Jesus had been talking with the disciples, all 12, about, that he would go to Jerusalem, suffer, die, rise again. And so Peter, never to be outdone, he's got to say something, doesn't he? He's some people's favorite apostle or disciple because he just does not have a filter. So he's already given one great answer, right? Jesus, you're the Messiah. Secondly, he's pulled Jesus aside to try and advise Jesus on why he's wrong. And here, he doesn't know what to say, so he says, hey, Jesus, it's good for us to be here. If you wish, I'll put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. He doesn't really know what to say. Have you ever been that way? Yeah, me too. Just once. Or twice. And then there's this cloud that comes. A bright cloud covered them while Peter is still speaking. Kind of like God's coming and saying, Peter, don't mind me, I'm cutting you off. And this cloud, the voice, God's voice, says, this is my son, whom I love. With him I'm well pleased. You know, those words were spoken on the day that Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist in the Jordan River. God said those same exact words. And as the dove came down upon Jesus, the Holy Spirit, this is my son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased. But there's one other thing that God adds here. With him I'm well pleased. Listen to him. I thought it was interesting that one of the children said that the real essence of listening is when you do what someone says, right? That when your mom says, clean your room, they know that you're listening when you actually do it. So listening to Jesus, not only getting the content of what Jesus is saying. Jesus is saying, I'm going to suffer, I'm going to die, this is going to happen to me. Not only getting that content, but that they are to follow Jesus. You see, when Peter messed up his answer, Jesus said, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. In other words, Jesus is reminding us of our humble state before God. And that he who's going to the cross invites us to come with him all the way to the cross. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. So as Jesus had said that, God the Father is saying, listen to him. And I want to ask, how are you doing at listening to Jesus? Well, first of all, you got to know what Jesus says, right? I know that I started just before this new year at Christmas time. It was part of my message on Christmas Eve that I'm kind of looking at new ways for me to be listening to God, listening to Jesus. And I'm doing some things like when I walk the dog in the morning, I'm listening to the Bible while I'm doing that for 15, 20, 30 minutes. And it goes really fast because I'm not turning the pages, and sometimes I really absorb it. Other times I think I might have to go back and listen to that again. But regardless, God's instructing me. He's showing me his ways, helping me to understand his love and how personal it is for me and for all people. God's speaking, and as he does that, I find that I actually feel guided by God through all the ups and downs of life as I go on. I feel like, I can meet a lot of things, a lot of challenges when I've been listening to God. Maybe in my heart of hearts, I'm growing and learning and believing that God is over all things so that I don't have to be. Otherwise, I'd mess it up. Listen to him. How are you doing at listening to Jesus. And I also said at that Christmas Eve service, there's a teacher who says that every Christian is being discipled by someone in some way. Many people by the podcasts that they choose, or by, the talk radio that they listen to, the TV shows that they do, the newspapers that they read. And so much of all that our culture does kind of filters in. It becomes the informed way that we choose to live in our country, in our world. Why not make Jesus your podcast? And listen to him and let him guide you and shape how you see everything, whether it be on a macro level or on a micro level, one-on-one. What would that change? And then as I was thinking about that with this sermon, with this message, with God saying, listen to him, I kind of turned the page a little bit and looked at some of the things that Jesus said in Matthew's gospel. As Jesus went into Jerusalem, he's coming right up to the date where he knows that they're going to try and trick him, but also they're going to simply arrest him, execute him, and then he's going to suffer, die, and then rise again. So there was a teacher of the law who came to Jesus and said, "Teacher, Jesus, Rabbi, what is the greatest commandment in the law?" Kind of testing Jesus. If they can catch him, then they can kind of bring up those charges against him. And Jesus said, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself." All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. Jesus didn't just teach us what love is. He showed us what love is in the way that he went to the least, those who are marginalized, those who are outcast, those who are thought to be just not good enough to be in the church of his day. He got criticized all the time for hanging out with those people. And yet he changed their lives because of his love. Also, in the days before Jesus died, he told his disciples and all who were listening a story about someone who's separating the sheep from the goats. And he told this story, and he says, "The king will say to those on his right, 'Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me.' And the people who heard this, the righteous, will answer him, 'Lord, when did we see you like this?' And Jesus said, 'Truly I tell you, whatever you did for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did it for me.'" Isn't it interesting, all the things that kind of cloud our vision on what life should be like, maybe directs us in how we should be? Jesus boils it down to something so simple. He only had one command: love. And he sends us into this world every week with people crossing our path, both good and bad, annoying and very well-meaning and joyful and nice, all types of people. And he says, just love them. And no matter what you see going on in our world on a macro level, no matter what you see going on even in our country, so polarized, and the polarization, just hang with me for a second. I'm not going all political. The polarization really centers on hate so often. And Jesus had one command. What was that? Love. So we as God's people, let's take it to a micro level. Jesus loved people. What are you going to do this week? I'm just going to love people. I'm going to leave the labels behind, leave all the other talk behind, and whoever God brings across my path, I'm going to do the one thing I can: I'm going to love them. I'm going to have compassion for whatever they're going through. I'm going to listen to them, because as I join them right where they are, it's like I'm almost joining Jesus, who said, whatever you do for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you've done it for me. And when we do that, we're going to find that this God who calls us to follow after him, Jesus Christ, the Son of God, who in his glory shined light in the darkness, we'll find that he's shining his light on us as he guides us, and that we'll be shining his light as we follow him, listening to him, loving others, looking for people that we can go to and serve. In Jesus' precious name, amen.